What is up, fellow sickos? I am Dan Favale coming at you with my certified fantabulous co-host, Mr. Grant Hughes. We are on to the second part of our exercise of will every NBA team be better or worse, just looking at their regular season win total. We pointed this out with the Western Conference. It's the Eastern. Progress isn't binary. In this case, we are making it so. So will all of these teams win more games than last season or fewer games? That's the only question we're setting out to answer. We're also setting out to answer it incredibly quickly because we have an ambitious agenda today. But we always have time for this question. Grant, how the heck are you doing?
I'm excited for our ambition, and I'm also prepared to go much shorter on all these teams because I did not write these slides up like you did initially. So my notes are not quite as comprehensive as they were for the West.
The other thing is the existences in the Western Conference, they are more binary, cut and dry, where it's this team is this team is that. And so there are a couple teams that I think we'll get into, and it's, we could see, but it's just, it all feels relative to the West, where there are, as of right now, 14 teams that are actively not trying to lose. And say 13 if you think the Jazz are going to pull some, shenanigans and made up body part injuries with their vets. Like, so it's just, it feels like this conference right now is made to be quicker. I guess we'll find out, though.
Yeah, we'll see. I am going to resolve to allow you to talk me out of my position more often than for the West, because I was looking back and I feel like I only caved like once or maybe twice, but I'm going to be a lot more suggestible this time around.
Well, the other thing is that I might have defaulted to you a couple. We didn't differentiate on that. We differentiated on the Pelicans, and I'm trying to think of what other team we might have.
The Kings.
On. The Kings, yeah. So, but I wanted Kings fans to be mad at you, and rest assured they were. So I had to default.
That happens no matter what. So, well, actually, it wouldn't happen if I would ever say a good thing about the Kings. But
one of our loyal commenters, who's a Kings fan, did say that Grant is growing on them. So,
oh, hey,
there you go. Take the dubs. All right, let's get into this. I say we did it fine last time, Grant. I say we alternate and just pick. We don't have to go in any sort of order here. They're on the board if you're watching on screen, and I will give you the first choice to throw to me.
Well, ironically, since we're going out of order, I'm going to make this pure chaos and then start in order and go Atlanta Hawks first, just so nobody knows what to expect. I guess. So again, 36 wins last year. I was kind of like, I guess I was surprised when I looked, because I just didn't remember the Hawks being quite that bad. So starting there, that's a fairly low bar. I guess in my notes, and I'm just going to go along with this, I start with a question for you. And that is, do you think the DeJounte Murray trade had anything to do with getting better in the short term, like AKA for this year? Or were there other factors? That's kind of a loaded question. I feel like I know the answer, but this is, I think, where we should start.
No, I think it was just the fit between him and Trae Young, and the rest of the team really wasn't working. DeJounte Murray was overstretched on defense in Atlanta, and it didn't seem like, even with him being on the like, his contract to me is a steal. That 4-year, basically $120 million extension, didn't seem like there was a huge market for him. I will say though that it does seem like there was a little bit more to it. That it was about, to me, it was just about reorientation more than anything else. However, it does seem, and this is probably because their picks for the next 3 years are controlled by the Spurs, that they did place an emphasis on, like, we need rotation bodies after this. And so I look at that and say, okay, Larry Nance Jr. might have always been included, but I look at Dyson Daniels, where it's like they probably could have gotten more first-round equity out of New Orleans or another team. Mm-hmm. And it seems like they really valued Dyson Daniels for the skill set of, he will go out, he will guard the other team's best player on most nights, so long as they're playing on the perimeter. And they're probably going to give him backup point guard minutes at this point, unless they're really ready to cut Kobe Buffkin loose. So it feels like, not that they were trying to straddle the line of the two, but to me, this wasn't about getting better. This was about rectifying a misread that they had. And I was kind of in support. I want to make it clear. I thought they gave him too much for DeJounte Murray, but I was a little bit more optimistic on his fit with Trae Young. It just never ended up panning out. And I'll say the two things that I think are the driving forces of it is Trae Young still has not adjusted his game nearly enough on the offensive end. And then just DeJounte Murray is not built to be your best defensive player and your second or first best offensive player.
Yeah. Whereas Daniels is a guy that should be your best defensive player and is not going to be saddled with the scoring, obviously, because he just doesn't have that in his game yet, the scoring burden that Murray did. The reason I asked that question is because I feel like there were iterations of a Murray trade that could have made the answer yes. Like they could have made a move that was, not so much for picks or a young guy in Daniels and maybe a backup or I guess on this team, a third string center in Nance, that would, had they made that hypothetical deal that brought back someone, roughly as valuable as Murray, but at a different position or whatever, it would have been easier to say, oh, they'll just be better, right? Because 36 is not that many wins, and they got somebody that not only makes more sense, but is like just a more established, better, high impact guy right now. That isn't how I view the trade. I think we view it fairly similarly. So that gives me some pause. I would say, though, that like Jalen Johnson should be better. I think Dyson Daniels, the arrow is still going up. I think Onyeka Okongwu, the arrow is probably still up. It's not like dramatically so, as was the case with like Johnson's breakout last year. But there's enough in terms of projectable growth within this group that I think I'm leaning better. I do wonder, though, like, does a hypothetical Capella trade, like, what does that return? Is that something they do to get off money? Is it possible to trade him and get better? Because you've got a Kongwu on that extension, and theoretically Nance is going to play and probably should play a little bit at least as a backup. So maybe there's some upside if you can turn Capella into something. But ultimately, it's like 36 is not a lot of wins. They have enough young guys, and it does feel to me, lastly, that this is. Well, maybe I'll ask you. Do you think this is the last sort of? We're going to take a crack at Trae Young as the key guy, this sort of version of the team. We're going to go another full year with Quinn Snyder. We disappointed ourselves last year. We'll give it a run and then maybe reassess after this season. So that like suggests they're going to kind of, try to win as many games as possible. That's kind of how I look at it. Do you see it that way?
Yeah, I would agree. And I think we might even be just overthinking it too,
Maybe.
because it's a low number to begin with, and they're going to care enough to try and beat it. Whereas there might be teams, Washington, Toronto, we'll get to Chicago, like Brooklyn, they'll be pivoting out of trying to win at some point. And so because there are more teams that aren't actively invested in winning, there'll be more wins available. But the Trae Young stuff is interesting because we're getting at a point, after this season, he will have 2 years left on his deal or 2 years left on his deal, including a player options. Like we're in prime extension territory with him. And if he's not going to sign one, or if they don't want to give him one, even with your 2 picks or 3 picks at that point, still headed out to San Antonio, if you include that draft next summer, that's where you're going to probably have to make some decisions. But it also wouldn't shock me to see this team, I don't want to say double down, but to actually make a trade that comes with like to get a wing or maybe a different, like another type of forward in there that probably helps with their defense, but maybe they also have some ball hand. They have a bunch of stuff that they need. And by the way, we haven't even mentioned Zachary Risache.
Yeah.
That's tough here because I don't know if he should project to be fine defensively, and offensively. I think he's a good fit because he'll run in transition. He'll play off the ball. Maybe you can get him some minutes where he'll be able to handle the ball more. I mean, like I said, you don't have a true backup point guard unless you like Kobe Buffkin or Dyson Daniels there. So, but the level of experimentation with him or investment in him, are you going to start sitting him or cap his role because you're trying to win 42 games, or are you really going to see this through? And also, you're not super deep on the wings anyway, so you might as well play him. But I come back to the numbers low. There are other teams in the East that are going to be less invested in winning. And so I think even if it's a matter of getting 37 wins, I think they get there.
Yeah, I think that's right. It really just that 36 is an easy number to beat if you have a guy who's been an all-star multiple times in Trae Young. All right, your turn to pick.
Getting us back on a time track, I'm going to go to the Brooklyn Nets because I feel like this should be an easy one. Although they only won 32 games last year, but they've now traded Mikal Bridges. But if we go back and map out the Kevin Durant trade tree for them, do they end up with like 37 first-round picks? Well, if they haven't traded Cam Johnson yet, they might get more first-round picks for him.
Yeah. No, 32, actually, I mean, 32 is, I guess, a quote-unquote low total, but like if this team gets out of the teens, I think I would be surprised. So, yeah, you said it, no Bridges. And between Cam Johnson and like Finney Smith and whoever else, they are clearly more likely to be sellers than buyers. And I think the last thing is, in the interest of kind of blowing through a fairly easy one to my mind, this was the 23rd ranked offense in the league, and I think there's a great chance that they are significantly worse than that this season.
We're going to see What's the over under? This is the conversation to have if we can spend like a minute or two on them. What's the over under on the number of shot attempts, or what's the over under on Cam Thomas's usage rate? If I set it at 31, are you taking the over or the under? He might have even been close to there last year.
I think you might need to go higher than that. You might need to go like James Harden 2018 usage rate to get what he's
okay. I mean, his usage rate was 30.5. So
I'm going over.
That's a pretty like I hit it at least spot on. I'll just take over then.
Yeah.
Just like
yeah. No, I mean like, and that's the thing. Like, it might be exciting every fifth game when he like wins them a game by going for 48 on, 32 shots or whatever. He can be more efficient than that, but like ultimately he's kind of a perfect like tank commander in that like he's just going to get buckets, and if you play him in a huge role over a large sample of minutes, like the bottom line will be a negative, even if he sort of does what we expect him to do offensively. He's kind of a perfect guy for that.
I am excited though. Hopefully they'll try, because he made incremental improvement. That might be a little bit generous, but can you like improve his playmaking? Like they have the roster to just experiment with, and also just give Nicholas Claxton the ball and like let him run inverted pick and rolls.
Right. Yeah. Give him the
Jaren
Jackson season where it's just like try a bunch of stuff and see if you can do it. Because eventually, if we're good again, that'll be a bonus.
I'm kind of just excited from a productive chaos perspective, because Sean Marks is back in his bag of now they have their own picks, but like he's back in his bag of the team that was the most fun in Brooklyn was when him and Kenny Atkinson were there. Granted, they didn't have any of their own picks at the time, but they were just rebuilding from the ground up and they knew how to experiment and hit there. So I am fascinated by this team, but this isn't a question. They're going to win fewer than 32 games.
Agree. All right. I would like to select the Orlando Magic. Because this was one that I struggled a lot with, partly because I went through this in my notes and did it alphabetically, and I got to Orlando, which is like the fourth to last team. And I looked back up and I was like, I got almost everybody getting better. So somewhere it's kind of like when you're doing over-unders and you end up with like 200 more total wins than you should have. I started to feel that way right around here. So 47 last year. Like I'd say a mildly surprising, but not shocking level of growth over the year before, just because of the youth on the roster. It was foreseeable that Orlando would get a lot better. I just think maybe I'm getting to the point where I have too many teams improving. I'm not sold. We love the KCP acquisition. However, I think we both agree that it was disappointing in that it wasn't enough on its own, because what they need, and this is really your take that I'm hijacking, like you needed more of a guy who's going to create shots, like a facilitator, a floor general, like that kind of thing. So maybe we've overvalued the KCP edition to some extent. And I'm looking to poke holes because I'm going to say worse, and maybe that's 46 wins. And I realize how crazy that seems because they made such a leap and there's so much youth here. I just, maybe Jonathan Isaac's not as healthy. Maybe, I don't know, Jalen Suggs regresses as a shooter. I'm just looking for ways, because I do think sometimes when a team makes a jump like this, there's a little bit of pullback, kind of like what people expected from the Thunder last year, which that's a terrible example, because if Orlando goes the Thunder route, they're going to win 400 games. But can I talk you into that at all? And I'm very much prepared to be talked out of this, because on its face, it's kind of wild to say a young team's going to get worse.
I would frame it this way. It would not shock me if they won fewer than 47 games, but I think because you're looking at the landscape of the East and the teams that are in front of them, I would say all of them are still going to be in front of them, because like Milwaukee and Cleveland didn't have the best health and they still finished with more wins than the Magic. The Knicks got better, and the Boston's just Boston. So you have Indy, I would say, and then Philly as the teams below them. That's like, oh, we could envision both of them winning more games. A healthier Tyrese Halliburton, him and Siakam getting to go through a training camp together. I'm still going to go better. Okay. I think because the stuff that you laid out, it all makes sense. But like, are we really going to predict that everything goes wrong? That Jalen Suggs regresses as a shooter? That Paolo Banchero gets even less efficient or doesn't improve his efficiency? That KCP doesn't do anything to help the floor spacing? And I keep coming back to this, is that they had the second best defense in the league last year, and that defense got better with Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. And so even if their offense is still not up to snuff, I still look, and here's the three things that sell me on the offensive end is that Paolo evolving and becoming more efficient, Franz Wagner not shooting 0% from three
Yeah.
or whatever it was on jumpers, really.
Mhm.
Although he did play in the Olympics. Is he going to be tied? Like, he's played a lot of basketball lately. And then Jalen Suggs continuing to get better, at least staying on this same track. So even if you think all those things aren't going to happen, at least one or two of them probably is, because these are talented players. They're not no names. And the other thing that I don't think we can discount here is, even if they don't want to go bigger game hunting, there's just a variable level of moves they could, like, if they want to, I think they could go out right now and trade for LaMelo Ball. They have a package that could get them that, but they could also be like, well, we're more interested in Anthony Simons or Colin Sexton or Malcolm Brogdon. They can do all of those things and just get exponentially better to varying degrees, of course. And I think they will at some point make a move, unless they're way better than expected, in which case this isn't even a conversation anymore.
Yeah, no, I think you swayed me. I just, as a general practice, it's probably not a good idea to start from the premise of I need to decide how to say this team will be worse and then reverse engineer it from there. But you are going to need to talk me out of somebody being better, because I don't know what your board looks like, but I got way too many teams getting better. All right, your turn.
I honestly didn't go that deep into it, but by the way, I think everything you said is just perfectly valid. And the thing I would worry about, like, Jalen Suggs and Franz Wagner are very good, but there's still an iffiness for me to them on the offensive end. And so we'll see how it pans out. But the Magic 146, and they got better, like, just objectively on paper. The Isaac Held stuff is good, because he wasn't like playing a ton of minutes last year. And yet it's, well, can you count him to play that much? But if you can if in the minutes that you play Suggs, Isaac, and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope together, good luck fucking scoring as the other team. Oh, it's my turn. I'm waiting for you to why isn't Grant doing anything? I'm actually, I don't know if this team will be quick, but let's go to the Chicago Bulls, Grant.
I don't know if it will be quick.
They won last year. They won 39 games, which I just assume was their goal, because that's just what the Bulls do.
Mission accomplished. We did it.
DeMar DeRozan and Alex Caruso are gone, and in comes Josh Giddey. In comes Jalen Smith. Andre Drummond gone. That doesn't get that's another player they probably should have gotten some seconds for, and they just decided to let him leave. Grant, better or worse? And honestly, if I could hijack it, I wouldn't say what they're doing is competent at the moment, but I do think it at least suggests they are looking at the bigger picture. I don't know if they have the right angle, because literally the two biggest losses that they had, they went about it. I would have prioritized picks rather than Josh Giddey. I would have done something to my books. Is it stretch LaMelo Ball, involve a third team? Why are you not getting the 2031 Sacramento Kings pick swap when you're giving up DeMar DeRozan? Because your books were structured improperly. Yeah. Fix it.
Right. It's because they didn't want to take on Harrison Barnes, basically, right? Like that was they didn't want that money, which is insane. Like that taking on that money would have been way more than worth it to get that pick. So I'm going worse. This was not that easy for me. I think the crucial question that you kind of touched on is do the losses of Caruso, DeRozan, and Drummond, which are not insignificant, can those be offset at all by Zach LaVine playing more, by Patrick Williams playing more, by maybe Kobe White getting a little better, by maybe Ayo Dosunmu getting a little better, by maybe Modest Bazelis being a positive impact rookie? Probably not. That would be, all those things would have to go right for the Bulls to just break even. And then we're still looking for ways to how are they going to be better than they were last year? I don't really see it. I think that they're sort of embracing reality and acting a little more sane in the way that they're building the team, which means that they will trade Vucevic and LaVine if they can. They're not going to go target someone that's going to try, they're not going to chase this 39 to 43 win range. I don't think so. Right. I don't know what the number would have had to been for me to say better. If it was 33, 34, I could see them accidentally winning more than that, but just because I think White's a good player. Patrick Williams might be a helpful player. They have those guys.
Ball's just healthy and playing for them too. He was the driver of their success back in 21, 22. So he was a primary driver. There was obviously other factors involved. So I just think I don't trust them, but I even if they let everyone stay on this roster, the pathway to them being better is just feels too difficult. 39 wins when you look at this roster is a lot. And also, I do think having Josh Giddey immediately mitigates the value of so many, of Kobe White. not getting as many on-ball looks probably. And if you think they're going to figure out a way to make it work with him, okay, well then Ayo Dosunmu or Zach LaVine or Patrick Williams is good, like, or Modest Buzelis, like, you're not going to have the same level of freedom to experiment on offense. I don't trust that they're going to end up moving all these guys, but if we're running this team, it's not just give Zach LaVine. By the way, you know what would completely make me do a 180 on the Lakers offseason, even if this happens in the middle of the year, is that if they just trade salary filler and no picks for Zach LaVine, I will end up being like, you know what? They fucking 100%. Played that perfectly. Yep. And aside, though, they should be moving Kobe White and Ayo Dosunmu. And Patrick Williams should absolutely be on the block once he's trade eligible, because the value specifically of White and Dosunmu, it's never going to be higher than it is right now, because they're going to sign more expensive contracts at some point. Neither of them are making enough to be extended, even in sort of this extension happy market right now. They're going to win fewer. And I guess that's a vote of, like, Bulls fans should be happy about that, because by the way, they have an incentive. If they're not, let's say they're not on a 39, like if they're not on a 39 win pace and able to get in the play-in, they're going to want to lose because they owe that pick to San Antonio with top 10 protection next year. So I honestly think, I'll frame it this way. I think they're more likely to be closer to the teens than they are to 35 wins.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that should be the goal, right? Like that should be the hope and the goal, that they're down there, like flirting with a bottom 3, bottom 4 record at the end of the year. All right. Let's go all the way to, that's too easy. Let's save that for later. I would like to nominate the Milwaukee Bucks. 49 wins a year ago. And I would just, I'm going to throw to you for the leadoff prediction here with a stat that I'm sure you're aware of. When Milwaukee's best 4 guys were on the floor together last year, Lillard, Giannis, Middleton, Lopez, plus 16.3. That's a stupid net rating. That's like Jokic, with the starting 5 net rating type of thing for Denver. And it was a huge positive, actually, in 2 of the 3 cases, even higher than plus 16.3 per 100, whether it was Malik Beasley as the 5th guy, whether it was Andre Jackson Jr. as the 5th guy, whether it was Patrick Beverley. All 3 of those guys, when playing with the other 4, like, there's a plus 20 something in there. There's a plus 30 something in there. I think Gary Trent Jr. can handle that 5th spot as well or better than all 3 of those guys. So this comes down to how often can that unit be on the floor. And Doc Rivers, going back to the Clipper days, just loves to play his best guys together all the time and just tank in those reserve minutes. I think this is a team that's kind of set up to just bank huge, like, positive margins with those guys out there. Health questions abound, but are you saying better or worse? I'm obviously going to say they're going to be better, but
I would agree with you. And I don't really have anything to add other than, like, I think that they can get to a point where they're staggering and still being fine too. Like, some of the minutes where it's like, if you don't have Brook Lopez on the court, like, they had some lineups that really killed. And so I think they can get to different situations. I do worry about Chris Middleton's ankles. He's just on this weird trend where it's like he gets injured, it takes him a while to ramp up, and then he's really good just in time for them to lose early in the playoffs. And so that's something to monitor. But the other thing, I don't think you mentioned this unless I missed it, Damian Lillard shot like 33% on catch and shoot threes last year. You don't think he's not getting better? That is never going to happen again. And so now you get to go through another training camp with him and Giannis, and he's more settled in Milwaukee. He's talked a lot about the mental toll of moving. You can make fun of him for it if you want, but that's like a real thing, and it shouldn't be as big of a factor this year. The thing with this team, by the way, they did slick work on the margins. Forget even before they had Gary Trent Jr., getting Taurean Prince and DeLon Wright, absolute just massive wins for the organization. I don't know how you feel about their draft. I wasn't super high on it, but like getting players who can contribute now, DeLon Wright, Taurean Prince, and Gary Trent Jr. all fill rotation spots. Like, they can play in a playoff rotation, I would argue. So I think they're better. They should be in the 50s. And look, they have the cushion because we saw it last year for some of their guys to miss time, and they'll still get there. I do worry about the lack of overall athleticism on this team now, and point of attack defense is probably still going to be an issue, even with Gary Trent Jr., because I assume that, like, DeLon Wright can probably handle it, but you are conceding a lot offensively at that point. So they do have some questions to answer, but like, this team, if they're even relatively healthy, I would just think that they're going to have like 52, 53 wins.
Yeah. If you're going to say they're going to be worse, it's got to be based on Middleton is just like, this is finally the injury that Middleton just can't overcome. Like, he can't even be effective in short stints. And that Lopez, who was kind of approaching the cliff, it felt like at times last year, really like goes all the way over it at his age. I'm with you. I think there's enough top end talent, and just like, the heist of Trent Jr., Wright, Prince, and Portis are like a pretty darn good 6, 7, 8 in terms of rotation pieces. So I think there's more than enough here to get over 50.
It is my turn to pick for you. Who do I want to pick? I honestly, this team confuses the hell out of me, so we're gonna go to the Miami Heat.
Oh,
Grant,
good. Yeah, this was a really hard one for me too.
46 wins
46,
last
right?
year.
It's like, it didn't seem like last year was such a like failure for them, and then you
Yeah,
look at
and
a 46
they actually
win.
won more games than they did the year that they made it to the
Right.
finals. And look, they had stuff going on. Caleb Martin, who's gone, not fully healthy. Jimmy Butler dealt with stuff. Terry Rozier was injured by the end of the year. Tyler Hero missed time. List continues to go on. I don't know how to square away with what they did. I thought they hit a home run with keeping Haywood Highsmith at the money they did, but they did lose Caleb Martin. Everyone loves Khalil Ware and is very high on Jaime Jaquez. I have no idea what to make of this team right now.
I kind of Orlandoed this one too, where I was just looking for teams to get worse. And I am going to say that the Heat are going to get worse. If that happens, I think it's like 44, 45 wins, which should not feel like an affront. Cause like you said, they were down lower than that 2 years ago when they made the finals. So that doesn't foreclose on the possibility that they just, go on a run. But like, so you mentioned Martin. I think that's a significant loss, if you were going to say they're going to be better, right? Like, because
Right.
he was hurt last year, and I think Kyle Lowry's departure is like not nothing. I think Tyler Hero, how many games is he going to play? Missed half the season last year. Jimmy Butler played 60. Is Jimmy Butler at the point where you cannot feel confident in saying, "Oh, he'll play more than 60 games"? Like, I don't know. I think
Well,
that he's
contract year, Jimmy Butler, maybe.
maybe, yeah, maybe. But then that cuts the other way too, of like, how pissed off is he going to be? Like, probably since it's him, it means he's going to play really well. But he's just got the mileage of someone that, like, I don't know. 60 games. If you get over under 60 games played for Jimmy Butler, are you taking the over?
I'll take the over.
All right, I'm not that confident.
I think the bigger issue is, will he just be as good?
Right.
He's going to be 35 when the
Mm-hmm.
season tips off. That is not young, folks. Speaking as a 35-year-old, that ain't young. So that's a question. I do think if Bam is really like into the 3-point volume, I'm not saying taking 5 attempts a game, but like just comfortable spacing out to the corners, I think you can get to some interesting lineups with him and Khalil Ware, who, from what I saw of his rookie league film, like that, he might end up being a monster defensively. And like, that just might be the pathway to getting to better units. We've seen them experiment with kind of dual bigs in the past. I'm not saying that's the only recipe for them to get there, but I could envision them being better. If you tell me Tyler Hero's healthier, Bam is shooting threes, Terry Rozier's lasting the whole season, okay, maybe. And look, the Alec Burks signing was good at the minimum, but you have to go worse here. Like, it's just not like they lost a very valuable rotation piece, and they just don't have, like, yeah, okay, you have Jaime Jaquez, but is he going to do enough for you offensively to just, you're not going to miss Caleb Martin at all? And even if Jaime Jaquez was getting better, it wasn't just like you had depth to spare or bankable depth to spare at that point. So it's a tough number. It wouldn't shock me if they won 47, 48,
No.
but I think too many things need to break right for them to get there. And I will say, I continue to, like, even they have Tyler Hero, they have Terry Rozier, they have Bam, they have Jimmy. I just have so many questions about their offense.
Right. Yeah. Pretty high variance. Like, they could win 54 games and you'd be like, yeah, okay, well, I guess Jovic popped, and I guess Jaquez actually did continue to get better. Maybe Highsmith proves he's actually that kind of a 3-point shooter. But yeah, it really is just like, there's too many like iffy, like make or break things that have to go right to get to 47. Like, that's not a low total. So I'm uncomfortable with it, but I'm glad we kind of got to the same spot there. And I think it's my turn. Okay, we got to start picking off some of these really low totals. Let's do the Detroit Pistons. A whopping 14 NBA basketball victories last season. Just quick, like, overlook here. It is really hard to be that bad twice in a row unless you're the process Sixers, and Detroit is not taking that kind of approach, I don't think. It doesn't seem that way based on how they've transacted. Now, new management, you never know. We talked several times about how, like, this new power structure is not married to any of these picks except for the most recent one. So, like, if you are concerned about getting a year from now to the point where it's like, what do we do with Jalen Duren and Jaden Ivey extension wise? Like, maybe you do look to move those guys. I don't know that that's the right move yet, but that's on the table.
It also doesn't, if I can interject, moving those guys doesn't make you worse.
It might not. It might not. Yeah, that's the thing. So I'm going better. Just like I kind of like the Beasley ad, the Harris ad. I think Paul Reed helps. You get a full season of Simone Fontecchio. Cade Cunningham arrived. I think can continue to get better. 14 is just so low, right? Like they're gonna be better than that.
And if they're not, I'm curious as to like what are the moves or the nightmare scenarios in which they're worse. I guess Cade gets injured again, and
Yeah,
like Jaden Ivey doesn't develop, and you just don't really have anyone to run the offense. I think why I also think they're going to be better is they just have. I'm not super. I don't want to say I'm not super high. I guess I'm not super in tune with like what this roster is supposed to actually accomplish. But like you can get to some really interesting defensive lineups if you want to play Asar Thompson and Ron Holland together. And hopefully Asar Thompson's healthy after dealing with those blood clots. And the other thing is, okay, we talk a lot about the redundancies of some of the main play, like Asar Thompson, Ron Holland, even Jaden Ivey, and the ball dominance or the lack of shooting there. They have spacing on this team now. They got Malik Beasley. They brought in Tobias Harris, who could still be a floor spacer. You still have Isaiah Stewart, Simone Fontecchio you re-signed. You have Tim Hardaway Jr., who's going to take a bunch of shots you don't want him to, but in theory, he will space the floor. So I think the fact that you can get to lineups more easily where it's Cade plus at least 3 shooters, then I feel like you're just going to win closer to 20-something games by virtue of that.
And not just for Cunningham, but like, this is very much to me a prove it season for Jaden Ivey. And he's like less so than Cade. Like he's someone that if you put Beasley out there with, I don't know, Beasley Harris or Beasley Fontecchio, beef stew, like he needs the shooting because like the only real NBA skill he's shown is the ability to get to the basket quickly. And if you can space the floor for him, maybe you set him up to succeed. So you can at least, although this has kind of been the theory of the Pistons for a couple years now of like, let's get veterans at space because it'll help our non-shooting guards and our shooting guards. I think it just makes a little more sense. It's easier for me to see it like kind of functioning how they've intended this year. But again, this is all like, they're not going to win 13 games, which is what you'd have to believe for you to go lower. So this is just better by default.
That's an easy one. My turn for you. I think this one's it's a more interesting one. I don't know if it's an easy one, but the Charlotte Hornets are coming off 21 victories, Mr. Grant Hughes. I have them penciled in as better, in part because I think that people forget that they have competent NBA players on the roster. It's just they were so injured the past couple of years. And unless you think that they're also going to trade LaMelo Ball and or Miles Bridges, what is the pathway aside from if you want to predict a catastrophic or over significant level of injuries? Okay, fine. Go ahead and do that. Like they just have a lot of NBA players. Like if you go into their rotation, and I recorded something on the Hornets specifically a couple weeks ago, so I thought about it. They have just a bunch of NBA players across like 10 spots, probably. I mean, LaMelo, Brandon Miller, Josh Green, Miles Bridges, Mark Williams is probably your starting lineup. I actually think Josh Green is overrated in the sense that I don't like his contract, and a lot of people don't seem to care about it. And Charlotte kind of treated him like not an asset, but a flyer. But then off the bench, Vasilij Micic, Seth Curry, Cody Martin, who if he's healthy, goddamn, Grant Williams, who played well for them, Nick Richards, solid backup big. And what does Tijon Salon turn into? And they also do have Trey Mann. He's always had some wiggle to him. If they're healthy, I don't know. I'm going to definitely say that they're going to be a team that contends for the play-in, but you also just don't have the sample size to go off of. They turned over their roster at the deadline, but even just looking at players who are on their roster all season, LaMelo Ball, Brandon Miller, Mark Williams, and Miles Bridges played a whopping 7 possessions together without Terry Rozier or Gordon Hayward on the floor. And so it's just like we don't have the sample of this team to go off of, which I think works in their favor because they weren't terrible last year while having everyone. They were terrible. Look, LaMelo is the thing that ties it all together. And if you want to read into small samples, again, Terry Rozier minutes and Gordon Hayward minutes are caked into here. LaMelo Ball, Mark Williams, Miles Bridges, and Brandon Miller last year, plus 12.1 points per 100 possessions as a net rating. And they only played, I think it was 120 or whatever it was. So like, there's just a baseline of a competent team here. And I tend to be higher on LaMelo than consensus. If he's just going to be healthy and you get progress from Brandon Miller, I think this is a team that will probably make the play-in.
Yeah, I think I would have said better even if you'd told me LaMelo is going to play 30 games, just because you got Mark Williams played 19. Cody Martin played 28. Josh Green wasn't there. Brandon Miller was a rookie in a role that was way bigger than anyone expected him to have to play with that level of experience. The fact that LaMelo probably will play more than 30 games, and just it's, I don't know how confident I'd be going quite as high as like, oh, they're a play-in team, but it's more likely to me that they are a play-in team than they're in the 20s. How about, like, I think they're getting to 30 in their sleep.
Well, here's the thing. There's going to be an accidental play-in team in the East
Sure.
because Brooklyn, Washington, Detroit, and I'm going to throw Chicago in there. Like, those are teams that aren't going to be interested in doing it. And so if you're Toronto or Charlotte and you want to take the like, one of you is making the play-in.
Right. Nothing you can do about it, whether you want to or not. You're going to be in there. Yeah, I think that's right. Okay, that was fairly easy for me. Well, you mentioned him. Let's go Toronto, because that's another team that's projected pretty low here. So 25 wins for the Raptors last year. This is another one that, like, I was kind of shocked that the total was that low. Maybe I shouldn't have been, but I just didn't remember them being quite that bad. I guess they were very much like two different teams last year, so that's part of it. And in fact, just filter the basically season performance to after mid-February. So let's just say, basically post-trade deadline, kind of post-All-Star break territory. Worst point differential in the league for Toronto. So and also no Scotty Barnes at that, from I think almost all of that, right? I forget exactly when he went out, but that was a big deal. So
between him and Jalen Johnson missing games, that was a bummer for my most improved player ballot.
Most improved really went through it last year. It really struggled. So maybe here's the question. Does Barnes being back healthy with this kind of revamped, quickly Barrett, Grady Dick's going to play more, does that make enough of a difference to take what was the worst point differential in the league for 2 months and get you over 25 wins? I think so. And again, like, they're incentivized to not win a lot of games. I just don't know how you steer into the skid that hard to get down to 24, because I do think there's a fair amount of talent on this roster, and a lot of it actually I think should get better. So where are you on them?
Yeah, I went with better as well. And it actually, when I went into this, I thought they were going to be harder, but it was just like, I looked at the minutes they played with Barnes, Quickly, RJ, and Jakob Poeltl last year. They outscored teams by 11.5 points per 100 possessions.
That's a good lineup.
That's a good lineup. And I have questions about the entire rest of their roster. I've come around on Grady Dick with the close that he had to the season. I don't know how much they're going to lean on Jacoby Walter. What does Bruce Brown's role look like? It feels like, and how much is Kelly? I'd like to see them get to lineups, like even spacier lineups where Kelly Olynyk is playing, but are those going to hold up defensively? So I basically have questions about everyone outside of their top four, but like, just having those top four together, and then Scotty Barnes is going to get better. I think at least one of Quickly and Barrett will continue to improve. And if you buy into the shooting and or finishing improvement of Barrett in Toronto, it's kind of hard not to go over. My concern would be, does this become a team that decides, well, we're not good enough to do anything special. The only person we're actually married to on this roster is Scotty Barnes. And so, oh, look, Emmanuel Quickly's on the trade block in January or something to see. So I just haven't ruled. I would bet against it just because the way they prioritized Quickly and Barrett in the Anunoby trade. But I'm also like, I don't think they're bolted down to anyone except Scotty Barnes on this roster. And that, if you're Jakob Poeltl, of course, if you're Bruce Brown, but if you're Emmanuel Quickly, if you're RJ Barrett, I think they would move them if there were offers, like reasonable offers out there for them.
Yeah, I think another factor that we kind of touched on for several other teams is just like, if the Raptors' intention was to be like exceptionally bad, that has to start at game one, because the competition for being that bad is pretty fierce between like the Washingtons, even the Detroits, the Brooklyns, and we have to include West teams too, because we're just talking about lottery odds. Like, the Blazers are going to be terrible. Utah, who knows, but could steer into it.
What's going on in Utah?
Well, Toronto's a little bit like that to me, because a little bit, because like, there's scenarios where, it's like, I don't know, it's mid-December and Toronto's like 6th in the East or something. Like, that would be, they'd be like, way over their heads at that point, and no one would expect that to continue. But they could find themselves in a position where it's like, man, we got to do something. And I don't know what that trade is, or who you shut down to get a lot worse on purpose, and how much sort of patience there would be for that from guys like Barnes and Quickly and whatever, guys that think like, hey, I got a real roles now. Like it's my time. Like I want to show out. You're telling me I got to shut it down. Like that wouldn't go over well, but they're just too good. And they would have to try to, the tank effort would be like too egregious for this team for them to get under 25, I think. So I think we're in agreement there on the over or better.
I think this will be an easy one. Let's go to Boston, coming off just a monster 64 win campaign. And again, we're talking binary wins and losses, regular season only. They will probably be my pick to win the title. They're not winning 64 games again. And I think you could point, if you actually want to get into an argument about it, there's two things that I'm going to rest on. Porzingis probably isn't going to be playing a bunch before 2025. And so that has a trickle-down effect on your big man rotation. You're relying on Luke Cornett for more minutes in the middle of the season. You're relying on Emas Queta for more minutes in the middle of the season. The other thing, so you just come off this championship run. Granted, it wasn't a super fatiguing championship run, but like now you have Jason Tatum, Derek White, and Jrue Holiday are all on the Olympic roster that is going probably, as we record this, they've not played the game to get to the gold medal round, but they're probably going there. That's just a lot of basketball for all these guys. And the other thing is okay, you won 64, getting to 65 is that's a lot of victories.
Well, that's just like, yeah, we probably should have looked this up, but like what percentage of NBA teams historically have won 65 or more games in a season? It's like vanishingly small. Just it's really, really hard to be that good over a season. I think especially after the strain of the long playoff run and the difficult summer and stuff. So you kind of get into the non-analytical, like maybe a little championship hangover, maybe a little bit like and this is a real thing, by the way. They should know they don't need the number one seed like that. Right. I think much more so than anybody else who might actually want it in the East. The Celtics are like, they should feel very confident, and this will cost them games probably, that like we'll turn it on when we need to. I think they are justified in feeling that way about themselves. The other thing is not only Porzingis, like he's going to miss all that time. And I guarantee you they're going to be super careful with him when he does come back and is playing. Like he will play less minutes per game and actual, like there's no way he's going to play back to back. Al Horford is a million years old. He has to be played less, especially coming off that deep run. So yeah, like there's just no, like, what is the argument for them being better? Maybe flip it and put it that way. Like, how do you do that?
That the East is just not as good as we expected. That let's look at the teams that have some significant new additions where it's, like New York and Philadelphia are the same or worse for some reason. It turns out New York really, Mitchell Robinson's injured and they really miss Isaiah Hartenstein, or Philly, Joel Embiid's injured again. And that kind of goes off the rails from there. But that's really, the Celtics are on paper the best team in the league. I think the Thunder are the only team that has a reasonable case to be put over them in any sort of best team in the league discussion right now. But 65 wins is, and they shouldn't care about winning that. Like it's just, you mentioned it already.
They don't need it.
Yeah. So I just can't. What's more likely, that Jaylen Brown requests a trade because he's mad that Derek White made the Olympic roster, or that Boston wins 65 games?
Jaylen Brown trade request for sure, because they can't win.
Hey, we could go the real sports talk show route and just be like, well, is there discord brewing? Jaylen Brown didn't seem happy. He blamed Nike.
Is this team ready to fall apart internally? Probably not.
This is all to say they should be your pick to come out of the Eastern Conference. I'm just not betting on them to win 65 plus games.
Yeah. All right, let's do the Cleveland Cavaliers. I would start by noting that this team won 55 games 2 years ago, and the roster is arguably better and perhaps more secure because just about everybody who really matters has big new contracts, and there's no more who's going to be here, who's not. Got a new coach, probably an upgrade. Their best four guys were plus 2.7 last year, but played less than 1,000 possessions. They were plus 10.2 and about twice that many in 22-23. That's where those 55 wins came from. I think they're going to be better. I think they could be a lot better. I just don't know, unless you're going to cite injuries, why you'd say they're going to win 47 games or fewer.
Yeah, I think it might be fair to cite injuries at this point, or if you point to Darius Garland looking kind of awkward last year, maybe it wasn't kind of the byproduct of him getting hit in the face every 5 seconds. So there are reasons, the dual big stuff. Are they going to have to heavily stagger? They probably will, and Kenny Atkinson will figure it out. But like, they're not out of moves. Jared Allen could be traded if it's not working out, and they want to go the sort of put Mobley as our full-time center type deal. They have so many options, but I still kind of believe that the top 4 can just work out together because of what we saw in year 1 when Evan Mobley was a worse version of himself. And like Darius Garland was better, but like Darius Garland can get back to that point. So I think they'll pretty easily be better. And I actually look at them as the team. It feels like them and Milwaukee, but even more so them because we talked more collectively about the Cavs need to trade one of like so-and-so, or will Donovan Mitchell ask her out? It just feels like they're being overlooked more than any could-be contender should. And Milwaukee has some of that. Again, I feel like people have slept on, but they have Chris Middleton coming off ankle surgeries, and just their guys are getting older. All of Cleveland's players aren't even in their prime yet, or they're firmly in their prime. And so they're also just like, have you ever seen the top 4 of a really good roster locked down for so long when there's only one contract as of right now that would be considered like not the 25% max deal? And so like that's the, like they are built to sustain if they're good too, which is kind of scary here.
I just think like even if you're not convinced that Atkinson will figure out ways to use all 4 guys that are better than Bickerstaff did, like the ill fit between Allen and Mobley, and to some extent Garland and Mitchell, like that's a playoff problem. That's not something that I think kills you against the Bulls, in January or whoever. Like it's a problem down the road. Like I think probably until Atkinson proves it's not, but I'm not concerned about that stuff at all in terms of their regular season win total. If anything, it's a bonus just because we do know that Allen or Mobley can be the lone big, Garland or Mitchell can be the lone playmaker. Like that, it all works.
And the other thing is, I think because of the strides Mobley specifically made, I think during his lone big minutes, without looking at the actual numbers, like just off of remembrance, eye testing it, that's like now you could just say, oh, well, we'll just now we know we're going to have 48 minutes of great play in the middle. And so we have to heavily stagger them. Then so be it. Like you might just be better balanced off for that. And I think if you're trying to look for an issue with the core 4, I think the problems will come when it comes to crunch time. Yeah. And are we going one big like they did a lot of times last year? If Garland and Mitchell aren't meshing, and defensively, like you're not necessarily holding up, and there's a guy at the point of attack who's really like killing you, and who knows if Isaac Okoro's on this roster, maybe he'll resign by the time it comes out, or maybe Danny Ainge will do one of those late summer offer sheets like he did for Paul Reed last year. So that would be the level of concern, which is this feels like a 50-win team to me. And you could probably, I probably look at 4 teams in the East and say, I think they're going to win 50 games. And this would be one of them.
Yeah. And just, again, they've done it. They've won 50 with this team, like 2 years ago. I just don't see how they, barring injury, obviously, caveat every time. My turn.
My turn for you. And I'm going to throw you the New York Knicks because I'm curious. We haven't done off-season grades or anything yet, but I recorded a pod with Knicks Film School. I've talked a lot on my own about how I feel about the Knicks off-season. Where are you at with a team that just finished with the second best record in the Eastern Conference at 50 wins on the button?
So I worry about breakdown fatigue coming off that really tough, and not just postseason where they had a million injuries, but like down the stretch of the year when Deuce McBride's playing 46 minutes a night for like 2 weeks straight. That concerns me. That said, the depth has just improved. Like Josh Hart and Dante DiVincenzo coming off the bench is like, what a luxury. Like, what team wouldn't kill to have those be their first 2 guys coming off the bench? Like those are clear starting players that, so far have just proved that they can take on that starting role when they need to. Having them as reserves against opposing backups is just like, that's ridiculous. We know the Randall and OG stretch was like, oh my God, how good is this team going to be if with these 2 guys and everybody else, relatively healthy? I'm going better, but the thing that scares me the most, more than the breakdown, more than the fatigue, which I'm sure you'll guess, is just like, what's the center, setup going to look like? Can Mitchell Robinson be healthy? And if he's not, then like, are we just trusting that Tibbs will try Randall there? Is OG going to be the guy that guards 5s? Maybe. But 50 is a decently high total, even though I think this team on balance is quite a bit better and has I don't know we should maybe talk about their ceiling in terms of regular season wins. But like, if you got the kind of question marks they do at center, it does give me a little bit of pause.
And the other thing too, is that I've argued, I think Julius Randle is more important to this team because of who they decided to cash all their trade chips into. It's that, okay,
Sure.
could Mikal Bridges be your second best shot creator? Maybe. But what happened in Brooklyn, I think, kind of proved we know he's not going to be a number one. And it did, watching him, it was just, well, if you need him to shoulder a top 2 defensive burden, which the Knicks will, he's probably better off as the third option on your offense. And so if Julius Randle goes down again, you're in a situation where there's so much on Jalen Brunson once more. So does he break down? Or the other thing is, this isn't an insult to Jalen Brunson. He just finished 5th in MVP voting. There's no guarantee that he's back there. It's really hard to be at that level in consecutive seasons. I probably wouldn't have predicted, maybe I did predict it for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and maybe Jalen Brunson gets there. I've seen player rankings. A lot of people have him in the top 7 right now. That feels like a little bit high for me in terms of value. Yeah, there's no question. He's still that valuable to this roster. So it feels like there's a bunch of stuff that could go wrong earlier, where that stuff went wrong for them kind of later in the season. But it even went wrong earlier. Mitchell Robinson will probably be healthier. And I think I'm more bullish on them being better because I love the Mikal Bridges fit. Obviously, he fits anywhere. But I do believe that Tibbs is going to I think he's shown some lineup and functional flexibility over the past couple seasons or season and a half. And so my prediction would be that we do see ample minutes with Julius Randle and OG Anunoby are trading off 5 responsibilities. Yeah. Randle's the 5 on offense. OG's the 5 on defense. And look, if you get to those minutes, that unlocks Julius Randle in a way offensively that you I guess don't need to, because we've seen him play this role for so long and he's worked alongside Jalen Brunson just fine. But I actually think that's a pathway to getting a better version of Julius Randle too. And I think you have the personnel to look, just do it during non-Brunson minutes and say, Randle, OG, we'll make sure Mikal Bridges is on the floor during those stints too. And then just fill it out like Deuce McBride. You want defense, you want more defense, put Josh Hart out there. This is a really good roster. And I think there's still some depth to them, even though there's natural concern at the 5 spot. So I think they should be in the mid 50s.
I think that's right. And I wouldn't for talking about ceiling, if Brunson's healthy the whole year and just factor in average injury rates across the rest of the roster, this is a team I could imagine, because Thibodeau and all the guys on this roster play every game tomorrow the world's ending. 60's not it's a super high bar. I don't know what the percentage chance they hit it is, but it exists for them, and that's not true for 25 other teams. I don't.
That'll make Andrew Claudio of Knicks Film School very happy if he's listening to this, because he said he thinks they could get 60 as well. I would say I wouldn't use that as my framing, but I do think they're more likely to finish with the best record in the East than Milwaukee or Philly, just because those are teams that are not. I mean, look at Philly's best players. They're a little bit older. Embiid's always missed time. And then just Milwaukee, kind of the same difference. And those are teams that are not going to be as invested in getting it. Where Cleveland, Boston could stumble into it. That's why I'm not throwing them in the, say, the Knicks are definitely going to be, but Cleveland, I could see them just going for it. But Milwaukee and Philly aren't. The Knicks will.
Mm-hmm. That's a big factor. All right. We have, I guess Orlando was our only mild disagreement. Let's just get the Wizards out of the way.
Rude.
15 wins last year. I'm going worse. And I just think this is probably the least talented roster in the league, top to bottom, by a decent margin. The guys you would cite as they'll kind of stabilize things. Valanciunas, Brogdon, those guys are trade chips. They are not going to be there all season, I don't think. And even if they are, how much are they going to play? How much should they play? This is my pick for the worst defense in the league. I'm pretty confident in that. I think they're going to play Sarr a lot, and I think he is going to kill them. And that's okay. Just because you got to see what you have with him. So it's a super low total. I just I don't think they want to, and I don't think they can get much higher than 15 wins.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I would say that at least 2 of the Malcolm Brogdon, Corey Kispert, Kyle Kuzma, Jonas Valanciunas cluster of players that can help us will not be on the roster by the trade deadline.
And shouldn't be.
Shouldn't. Well, or that, or they won't be playing. I'm not saying that. Look, if the Wizards don't want to trade those guys, none of them, with the exception of maybe Kuzma, is going to get you altering assets, and that's he's probably not even getting you that. So, but they won't be. I'll tell you, none of them will be playing a lot of games after the trade deadline if they're still on the Wizards. So this is more, and I don't think Wizards fans, I will say, and I don't like painting fan bases as a broad brush, but they seem to like kind of, you always like, there's dissent among Raptors fans, a lot of it as to what the team is doing. And that's probably fair, but like the fans, the organization, the coaching staff, and the front office, like all those levels of Washington Wizards just appear to be in alignment here. And Wizards fans seem to be fully embracing kind of the suck. They want to know why we're not talking more about Keyshawn George. They want to know why we're not talking about more about Bub Carrington's passing. I will say the one thing I'll be watching, I don't know what to make of Bub Carrington yet, but that also ensures you'll be bad if you decide, well, we're not going to let like Malcolm Brogdon run a ton of the offense. Like this is Bub Carrington show. I hope they give more on-ball touches to Bilal Coulibaly. And I hope, even if it's ugly, even if he's shooting like 35% from two, just make sure that Alex Sarr doesn't go the DeAndre Ayton way of finesse on the offensive end. Like, let's make this someone who gets to the foul line, who's going to finish with force, who's connecting for God fucking sakes on his screens. I think he's going to end up, I tend not to read into Summer League, good or bad. Like I try to take away things with the eye test from it. And sometimes I probably don't place enough stock in it. I'm throwing Summer League out the window. I do it for like, it's just, he's so young and it's just such an odd situation, but they have a ton of developmental projects and all of them are going to just get a ton of run.
Right. And like, so we both love Coulibaly, but like if he has a bigger role and plays more, he's not going to be
improved player. Let's move on.
Win most improved.
Honestly, that's the one. And this might speak to how irrationally high I am on him. I still view him as their best long-term prospect.
I agree.
Well, I think with Sarr and Bub, I think there would be some disagreement, which is fair to have discussion. I will say, if you're going to accidentally be better than expected, it just wouldn't shock me if giving Bilal Coulibaly a bigger role is part of the pathway to that, because that's how much of a believer I am in him. Maybe you don't agree that he has the vision if they're actually going to have him run the offense. I just think in terms of, if you just need him to do some basic deferential things, coming around screens, getting downhill, he'll do it. And so maybe it's a matter of, well, other guys aren't going to hit the shots off his passes anyway. So what does it matter? And is he going to have connectivity with the bigs? I'm so high on Bilal Coulibaly that I hope they give him kind of the Denny Avdia bump that Denny Avdia finally got after like 19 years in Washington or whatever it was. So
that's the thing. Like I'm maybe not as high on him as you are, but I really believe in him as a long-term prospect. It ain't coming next year. Like next year will be the year I think where he plays more. And you look at like, I don't know, you sort dunks and threes EPM or whatever, and he's like the most negatively impactful player because he's playing a lot and he's pretty bad, but it's all okay because it's just, this is part of the developmental process. And that's true of like, I don't know, same for, I mentioned it with Sarr, and it's just like, I don't know, we haven't even mentioned like the saboteur in chief, Jordan Poole, who just nobody's better.
He'll probably be on the roster if anyone cares post trade deadline. Don't worry.
Probably, if he's not, this is a front office of the year if they figure out how to get off him.
So we only diverge on Bilal. Like I think I came closer to putting better, but we're running out of teams to call worse.
Well, that's the thing. Like I the total's so low that you probably should just say better, right? Like with Detroit, Detroit's just so much more talented.
I'm much of a believer in Washington's vision though, that they're gonna finesse this to get to like 13 win territory.
They very much know what they're doing here.
Let's go to the Philadelphia 76ers. They won 47 games last year, but I think it must be noted. Yeah, okay. They added, what's his name? Do you know his name? Who's that free agent they signed, Grant?
I don't know. Are we thinking of Lauri Markkanen? No, it was the other guy we spent all summer talking about.
Yeah. Oh, okay. That's right. So they got Andre Drummond. So you add Paul George, but the reason that I have to go better here, they won 47 games without a third star on the roster, while Joel Embiid missed more than half the season.
Yep.
I don't even know if we need to go into more deep. Like Maxey will get better, even if you think Paul George is getting older and worse. The pathway to them being worse, of course, though, is if Joel Embiid misses significant time again. I just think they're probably better set up they're better set up at the top. Like if you have Tyrese Maxey and Paul George, the on-off splits with Joel Embiid should not be as stark as they typically are. And if they are, then the Sixers probably have some other questions they need to answer. And finally, before I throw it to you, they have another big-ish move left in them because they can trade 4 first-round picks and they can still aggregate salary. They just can't take back more money in a trade. They could still do something meaningful, even if the player ends up being, I'm not saying they're going to go out and get a star, but like this is a Tari Eason team. I'm just going to throw Tari Eason every team, but like if they can make I'll frame it this way. They can acquire someone who will be a part of their closing unit. They have the assets to do that. And that's kind of scary when you think about, wait, don't they already have Tyrese Maxey, Paul George, Caleb Martin, and Joel Embiid? And yes, they do. And they can still get better from there.
Now, somebody is going to actually do this and prove this contention wrong. But like, you know, sometimes we go through and we rank like who are the best, you know, big, one and twos in the league. And it's like, oh, Tatum and Brown, or, you know, whoever it ends up being. Like, if we did that, I think Paul George and Tyrese Maxey would at least be in the conversation. If we were talking like your number 1 and 2 options, and theoretically that is not the role they will play on this team. So as like 2 and 3, I don't know who's got a better second and third best player. Like every team you would think of mentioning are like first, you know, shortlist championship favorite type teams. So that's just another way of saying what you did, which is like the talent boost. Leave all the bench guys. They just rebuilt a bench. Martin, Drummond, Gordon, Reggie Jackson, even like it just like they have guys now behind them. And just as a top 3, everybody made a big deal out of it. Like you got your 1, you got your 3, you got your 5. Like if you're going to have 3 superstars, you've spaced them out perfectly. There's no overlap. Everybody works, right? So yeah, 47 wins is way too low.
And by the way, here's the other thing. The Sixers actually won the minutes last year that Tyrese Maxey played without Joel Embiid.
Yeah.
And so now when now you're just adding Paul George in theory into the equation for those minutes. And instead of playing Tobias Harris a lot in those situations, you have Caleb Martin. That's a big difference in terms of Caleb Martin's a better two-way player at this point. Tobias Harris kind of fell off a cliff by the end of his like time in Philly, but like that lineup, Grant, so Tyrese Maxey, DeAnthony Melton, Kelly Oubre, Tobias Harris, and Paul Reed were plus 15.1 points per 100 possessions last year. You can very easily get to a best 5-man unit without Joel Embiid. That is better than that on paper now.
Yeah. I mean, so if you're going to go lower too, you obviously just pin it on, Embiid's going to miss a bunch of time.
Maybe PG as well.
Right. Sure. And, or like, oh, they lost DeAnthony Melton and Paul Reed. Well, like, yeah, Reed matters, but Drummond, I think is the difference between Drummond and Reed as a backup is pretty negligible. And Melton didn't play, like Melton was hurt all year. So it's not like, you know, these new guys they're getting aren't replacing, you know, high end rotation guys. They're just improvements on like what they got from those positions last year. What do we got left? Is it just Indy? Look at our pace. Unbelievable. Yeah, we'll go. Let's go Pacers.
Grant, nice wordplay. Look at our pace as we move into the Pacers.
That was unintentional. That's how dialed in we are right now. Okay, they won 47 last year. I'm going to go better.
Yeah.
I'm going better. I'm basically because full season of Siakam. I think Nembhard, Mathurin, Jarris Walker, Ben Shepherd could all be better. Tyrese Halliburton hopefully will not be like 65% of his best self for half of the year. So whether it's organic growth, whether it's new additions playing larger samples, whether it's their best player looking like the guy who was in the MVP conversation through like 2 months of the season before he had the hamstring, there's just a lot of ways for them to be better. So that's a kind of a overview. But are you with me? And if you're not, this is one I am prepared to be talked out of, but I don't know. I don't know where you start if you're going to say worse, other than the East has more good teams at the top.
I think if you want to be concerned about their defense, they didn't do anything to improve on the wings. And it doesn't, I honestly don't know. I can't wait to ask Caitlin Cooper about this, assuming she indulges it, what the plan is for Jarris Walker here. Tyrese Halliburton not going to miss as much time, I would assume, or like he's just going to be better wire to wire if he doesn't miss as much time. Because he came back, he wasn't the same player after the hamstring injury. Part of that was the midseason roster turnover. I'd also bet against something like that happening now. Maybe they go out and get like a Dorian Finney-Smith or a Jayshawn Tate. They would be an interesting Tari Eason team, by the way. Oh my God. But like, that's not someone who's going to fundamentally change how you play like Pascal Siakam is. And then you also traded someone who was fundamental to your offense in Buddy Hield and just the role he played away from the ball. And you had to make Tyrese Halliburton kind of do some different stuff off the ball. I think the biggest factor for them is now you get to go through a training camp with Tyrese Halliburton and Siakam. And now you get time to sit down and figure out, how do we use these two together? Because there's a lot of people like, well, they should have explored the 2-man game with them. And I always understand that when you're talking about stars, but you're also like, you're then involving in theory, the 2 best defenders on the other team in those actions. And so I think looking at their staggered minutes, some of them were super interesting. I think the base of the roster remains really good. Did it get better? Like just talent wise, where you could bank on a ton of improvement? I really think that depends on how you feel about Jarris Walker and Benedict Mathurin, who for me, if those two guys are playing substantial roles, I'm probably lower on the Pacers than I am. I'm not a Benedict Mathurin guy relative. I've seen his highs, Pacers fans. I promise I've seen Pacers games, but his fit on this team is just so cockeyed to me. And I just don't know if he's going to be able to become the level of defender and off-ball player that would be the perfect fit for their top-end units. And so just with the rise of Andrew Nembhard too, I think that complicates it even further. And then again, I am banking on a little bit that they will make a move, not a huge one, to just address like kind of the wing rotation where it's everyone's like, oh, is Benedict Mathurin and Jarris Walker going to play a ton? It just wouldn't shock me if one of those guys is not on the roster by the end of the season.
I was just going to say they could and I think should look to trade both of those guys, certainly Mathurin, for all the reasons that you laid out. And so like I imagine most Pacers fans, as is the case with most fans of specific teams, like believe in the inevitable growth to stardom of the young guys that they've drafted. The fit just doesn't work, I don't think. Certainly not so far. I'm not confident it will in the future. And so like, if anybody out there values Mathurin or Walker as the first round, like lottery picks that they were still, maybe they do, maybe they don't, like there's a deal to be made that could be like fairly consequential. You've got to find more money if you're really big game hunting. But like, I do think the Pacers should be more likely to make a trade that like you say, sometimes, maybe not a closer, but somebody that is like a six, it really in the rotation and does close sometimes. If you put, Mathurin and or Walker together in some package, you probably can't trade them at this, to the same team, because that's just like a lot of youth. But I mean, they're more likely to improve via trade.
High enough on who's coming back. Why not?
Yeah, no, I don't know. Trade him to Washington. Kyle Kuzma for Mathurin and Walker.
I would push back that they should. I just think that they should be more open to it than it seems, specifically with Benedict Mathurin. Like if you actually are married to Andrew Nembhard and Tyrese Halliburton long term, I just don't. Well, I don't see the theory of Benedict Mathurin on this team.
Or Walker, really, because you just, you maxed Siakam, you brought Toppin back at a number that says we're going to play this guy. I guess the Jalen Smith
is weird. I was just wondering, like, if you don't think Miles Turner is here, like, I'm not saying they'll trade him, but he is going into a contract year. If they're not going to pay him, it's easier to envision, okay, Toppin, Siakam, Jarris Walker, you cobble together a big man rotation out of that.
Yeah, maybe. I'm surprised we agreed there. That was my last one of like, I don't know. I could be talked out better.
We had 10 teams getting better, but I'll point this out. There were 6 teams in the West last year that won 49 games compared to 3 in the East. And so like there is room here, especially when the bottom is so bottom, right? That like there could be more wins available. I'm sure we're going to miss on some of these, but I don't look at any of this. Like, where's the risk that like the real, I guess maybe some people might think the Hornets and the Bucks are risks. I guess I just don't.
Well, I would frame it as like, if we're trying to justify why we have teams getting better by a 2-to-1 ratio, I think you could say between Brooklyn and Washington, those are probably going to be the worst records in the league. Like Portland might have something to say about it, but if you just look at the rosters, like Portland has way more talent than those teams. So if you say those Brooklyn and Washington combined for fewer than 30 wins, which we basically have said they absolutely will, then you're just apportioning those out to several teams, and that's how you get so many with improved records.
Are you ready to take us out of here?
Sure. Thanks everybody for listening, for watching, for appreciating Dan's unbelievable graphics, complete with emojis, overlaid words. Just really, if you're not watching, you should have been, is the point I'm making for these ones especially.
I was like bouncing off the screen. You're complimenting. Like,
yeah, get rid of it so you can look at us instead. Great. If you haven't already, rate, review, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Get on our YouTube page, subscribe there, comment, help the algorithm love us. Share all this stuff with your friends, with your enemies. Check out our merch. Join our Discord. Links for that in YouTube and podcast descriptions. Close as always. Shouts. Frank Ntilikina. Saw him make an awesome offensive rebound against Germany just before we started recording. And a beam of light came down from heaven and shone on Frank Ntilikina, and he just hoarded this offensive board and put it back. So he'll be back in the league soon. Apologies, Jared Allen.